On the morning of April 20th, 1918, amidst the grim realities of World War I, a squadron of British Royal Air Force Sopwith Camel fighters readied themselves for a daring assault. Their target, German reconnaissance flights that were critical for gathering intelligence over the embattled Somme Valley in northern France. As the first light of dawn stretched across the sky, casting long shadows on the ground below, the British pilots ascended into the crisp morning air, the rumble of their engines a harbinger of the battle to come. As the Sopwith Camels approached their target, they were taken by surprise by the roar of engines from above. Emerging from the clouds, a formation of German Fokker DR.1 triplanes dove into view with their menacing machine guns. Leading the formation was a strange plane painted bright red, its bold crimson hue setting it apart from the rest. By that time in the war, its pilot didn't care who saw him coming. He preferred a gentlemanly fight, and his opponents were going to need all the help they could get. From the cavalry to the cockpit. In the opening stages of World War I, nearly every military in Europe had divisions of cavalry, as they were well suited to the open, flat terrain of the battlefields. Horses were far easier to maintain and replenish than the newly invented motorized vehicles, which were confined to built roads and often presented engine issues. However, with the advent of trench warfare by 1915, traditional cavalry operations were becoming increasingly outdated, as the animals could no longer operate in the muddy and uneven territory of no man's land. When Manfred von Richthofen, a German cavalry reconnaissance member, heard that his regiment was to be dismounted to serve as dispatch runners and field telephone operators, he decided to act fast. Born in 1892 to an aristocratic Prussian family, Richthofen had already served as an officer on both Eastern and Western fronts, seeing action in Russia, France, and Belgium. While he initially pondered a transfer to supply and logistics, the young lieutenant was unwilling to take a non-combat role, writing to his superiors, quote, "I have not gone to war in order to collect cheese and eggs, but for another purpose." At the time, aircraft were becoming more and more common on both sides of the front lines, and on a leap of faith, he pushed to join Germany's Air Corps. Air superiority. When Manfred von Richthofen joined the German Army Air Service, the role of aircraft on the battlefield had begun to shift from purely reconnaissance to combat. His entry coincided with an era in which the German Air Corps dominated the skies over Europe due to the introduction of the Fokker, the first military aircraft fitted with a machine gun synchronized to fire through the arc of its propeller without bullets striking the blades. This novel design feat led to the era known as the Fokker Scourge. During this period of air superiority, trainee Richthofen met Oswald Boelcke, one of the war's earliest aces, and the first pilot to receive the Order pour le Mérite award, Germany's premier award for bravery. The influential captain took the trainee under his wing, tutoring and encouraging him to learn to fly the aircraft by himself. And soon after earning his pilot's certificate on Christmas Day 1915, Manfred von Richthofen and his brother were invited by Boelcke to join his prestigious Jasta II. One of the first dedicated fighter squadrons in history, the unit was made up of only the best of the best in the German Air Forces, including other air legends Werner Voss and Paul Boehmer. Initial victories. In late 1915 and April 1916, pilot Manfred von Richthofen achieved his first and second air-to-air kills. However, because both enemy machines went down over unfriendly territory, the victories couldn't be confirmed. Von Richthofen's first official victory finally came on September 17, 1916, when he downed an English plane over German lines. At the time, dogfighting was still in its infancy, and there were virtually no adopted tactics for air combat. Thankfully, his own personal hero and mentor, Oswald Boelcke, had developed a set of rules, fundamentals, and maneuvers known as the Dicta Boelcke. This set of simple dogfighting maxims included rules like using surprise to get the upper hand, remaining committed, keeping an eye on the enemy, caution at all times, and most importantly, choosing targets wisely. Racking up kill after kill, faithfully following these strategies and adding more from his own experiences would turn Manfred von Richthofen into an even bigger legend than his tutor. Red Skies. In late 1916, fresh off his 9th confirmed kill, von Richthofen decided to have his Albatros D3 biplane fighter aircraft painted a shade of red. His score increased steadily from then on, as did his fame as the lone Crimson aircraft menacingly flew over the European skies. Von Richthofen became an ace on October 16, 1916. Only 12 days later, his beloved tutor, fighter pilot Oswald Bulke, was taken down by enemy anti-aircraft fire. In January 1917, like his mentor, he was awarded the Blue Max, formerly known as the Pour le Mérite citation, for his 16th confirmed kill. And by the end of the month, the pilot took down an English two-seater and achieved his 18th victory. That same month, at almost 23 years old, he was appointed commander of Jagdstaffel, or Jasta 11. Soon, members of his squadron also took to painting parts of their aircraft red to avoid having their leaders singled out in a fight, while other units also adopted their own squadron colors. Despite obvious intelligence dangers, the German High Command allowed this practice, as propaganda publications exploited his existence by referring to von Richthofen as der rote Kampfflieger, the red fighter pilot. The Flying Circus. Manfred's legend of unparalleled success only grew from there. He single-handedly brought down 22 planes in bloody April 1917 alone, 4 of those in a single day, raising his tally to 52. Eventually, the Red Baron, a nickname born out of his origins in German nobility, became a national hero at home and the most famous and feared pilot of the war. By June, he became the commander of the first of the Air Service's new larger fighter wing formations, highly mobile combined tactical units that could move at a moment's notice to different parts of the front as required. Because of the unit's mobility, as the men used tents, trains, and caravans where appropriate, and their bright coloring, Richthofen's new command, Jagdgeschwader 1, became widely known as the Flying Circus. The Flying Circus, like acrobats of the skies, hunted like a pack of wolves. Seeking out the weakest of Entente opponents, the German aircraft would sneak in behind them, surprise them, and watch them go down in flames. Battle Scars. On July 6, 1917, Richthofen was engaged in a dogfight when a machine gun bullet fired by an enemy biplane grazed his head. With a broken skull, blinded in one eye, and temporarily paralyzed, the pilot spun out of control. At the very last minute, he managed to make an emergency landing on the German side of the lines. Hospitalized and on a period of leave, instead of only resting, Manfred penned his autobiography from his bed, titled Der rote Kampfflieger, or the Red Battle Flyer. His traumatic brain injury worried doctors. The German High Command, however, worried that the Red Baron's death would be an intense blow to the public. As a result of his injuries, pilot Richthofen suffered from spells of nausea, but most importantly, a perceived change in his temperament and behavior, making him more reckless in his decisions and prone to act out. Despite being offered a ground position to train further air crews, Richthofen insisted on flying, as it was his duty. By the spring of 1918, the Germans had launched one final offensive to try to end the war. The United States of America, who had already declared war on Germany, had armed forces already on their way across the ocean, with many of their pilots already flying missions above France. Meanwhile, the Red Baron continued to rack up more and more kills, though his previous wounds were cause for concern among his fellow aircrew and superiors. Propaganda was also in full swing, and there were rumors the Entente powers had placed bounties on the Red Baron, going as far as dedicating entire squadrons to shoot him out of the sky. While likely untrue, these claims were widely believed, possibly even by the pilot himself. Gallant and worthy. The 25-year-old pilot achieved his 80th aerial victory by shooting down a Sopwith Camel biplane flown by a Rhodesian pilot. A day later, on April 21, 1918, Richthofen led his Flying Circus Jasta over Vaux-sur-Somme in northern France. In what began as a routine engagement, the Red Baron rescued his cousin and a squadron mate, who were under attack by pilots newly arrived from the United States. As the Americans broke off, Richthofen instead decided to chase, an overly aggressive and dangerous move, uncharacteristic of him before his injury. Carried by a strong westward wind, Manfred von Richthofen suddenly found himself over enemy lines, where a Canadian pilot engaged and chased him. Simultaneously, anti-aircraft fire from the Australian Imperial Force flying below shot up onto his Crimson biplane. Over the French skies, Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron, was hit right in the chest by a single bullet, and his plane dove hard to the ground. While the Canadian pilot was initially credited, modern forensics suggest that the Australians took him down. Afterward, Entente soldiers collected his body from the crash site, and Manfred von Richthofen, the elusive Red Baron, was given a military funeral with full honors. For the event, numerous squadrons stationed in the area arrived with flower wreaths to the Red Baron's grave, including one that perfectly embodied the bygone sense of World War I chivalry felt amongst aircrew on both sides of the conflict, reading, quote, "To our gallant and worthy foe."